Okay, hello everyone. We're going to do glycolysis today in a very short, hopefully couple of minutes. This might be 10 minutes long, but we'll see if I can condense it to shorter. Okay, I've got the all okay from me. So basically glycolysis, we're going to start with glucose because of course glycolysis cannot occur without glucose. And this is, glucose, I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. So basically, this whole process is going to go from glucose to pyruvate, and I'm voicing this over, so I actually don't know what's next. Okay, so we're going to go from glucose to glucose 6 phosphate. And glucose is a 6 carbon molecule, and I'm counting carbons right there. You can see I just hit carbon 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see in glucose 6 phosphate that I've numbered the carbons. It's just this, it's the same numbering, but glucose 6 phosphate has, of course, an extra phosphate molecule and carbon 6. So in this step, we are going to phosphorylate glucose to form glucose 6 phosphate by transferring a phosphoryl group to carbon 6, where the hydroxyl group originally was, and it's catalyzed by hexokinase. So hexokinase is the enzyme in this reaction, um, and essentially what hexokinase does is it just phosphorylates, the carbon 6. So when hexokinase phosphorylates carbon 6 of glucose, you're going to end up with glucose 6 phosphate. And in getting that product from your original substrate, which was glucose, you're going to end up with a net ATP of -1. And so right now at step 1, we have net ATP of -1. So you're going to see as these steps go on is that you're going to have an expenditure of ATP, and then you're going to gain ATP in the end. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Mg2 plus, so magnesium 2 plus forms a complex with ATP. We're not going to worry about that right now, but magnesium, sorry, ATP has a huge binding affinity for magnesium. So that means there's a really low Km value there. But yeah, that's pretty much the first step. And as you can see, the delta G standard prime, or the delta G prime standard, is -16.7 kilojoules per mole. So this is very irreversible. You cannot go back. So when you see in gluconeogenesis, when I cover it later, it's going to be, you're going to have to use a different enzyme. So now we're going to move into glucose 6 phosphate being converted into fructose 6 phosphate. And so if you remember isomerization reactions, it's pretty much just changing the form. It's not changing the formula, it's just changing the form, because if you remember, an isomer is just changing you're just changing the structure, same molecular formula, pretty much. And this is going to be done by phosphohexose isomerase. Um, I like to remember it as phosphohexose because glucose is 6 and then fructose is 5. So you're going from a 6 carbon molecule to a 5 carbon molecule. And yeah, it's the same stuff. You're getting it on the same 6 carbon, like the phosphate group is still in carbon 6. You're just changing the form from glucose to fructose. Okay, and that's pretty much it. You can see it's reversible because it has a delta G of 1.7 kilojoules per mole. So that's pretty much it for that reaction. Catalyzed by phosphohexose isomerase, glucose 6 phosphate is converted into fructose 6 phosphate through there. So in our third reaction, we have fructose 6 phosphate being converted into fructose 1,6 bisphosphate, and this is going to be catalyzed through phosphofructose kinase 1. And the only way I can remember it as trying not to confuse PFK with JFK. I don't know why. That's just the only thing that came into my head. If you remember, we're going to expend a molecule of ATP. If you can see in this diagram right over here, we're going to use a molecule of ATP. And if you remember in reaction 1, we did that as well. So now our net ATP is going to be -2 because we are going to be using a kinase enzyme. And so because we're using a kinase enzyme, we're going to transfer a molecule of, we're going to transfer a phosphate group from ATP into fructose, and we are going to phosphorylate carbon 1. So remember, counting your carbons is also very important. So now we're going to have fructose 1,6 bisphosphate. So this is a phosphorylation reaction. Same with reaction 1, which was also a phosphorylation reaction. That's pretty much it for this reaction. Nothing too crazy, but this one is irreversible because we are doing a phosphorylation step, and we are using a molecule of ATP and turning it into ADP. Again, this is going to be combined with a magnesium ATP complex, but other than that, this is pretty much just a reaction, pretty straightforward. We're just adding a phosphate group on carbon 1, making F16BP. that's pretty much it for this reaction. This next reaction, reaction 4, we're going to be cleaving the molecule. So we're going to go from fructose 1,6 bisphosphate into the first product, which is dihydroxyacetone phosphate, as well as glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. So these two products are just what we're going to be cleaving fructose 1,6 bisphosphate from. So in dihydroxyacetone phosphate, you have carbons 1, 2, and 3 from F16BP, and then glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate is where our carbons 4, 5, and 6 come from F16BP. And that's just pretty much what happens here. This reaction is catalyzed by aldolase. I couldn't tell you why it's aldolase because there's really no trick for that one. The only reason I just think of that is it's because the opposite of an aldol reaction. Because if you remember, a typical aldol reaction is forming a carbon-carbon bond. So I'm not sure why that's what's used. Maybe it's a retroaldol reaction. I don't really know it too well because I don't remember if I learned it or not. But yeah, that's pretty much just this reaction. It's just cleaved there. There's nothing crazy about it. It's a reversible reaction. Um, and yeah, there's nothing really too crazy about this reaction. It's just you're cleaving F16BP into two molecules, and this is where we're going to get two molecules of something else because we're gonna convert dihydroxyacetone phosphate into glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. Okay, so reaction number 5, we're going to turn dihydroxyacetone phosphate into glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. This is catalyzed by triose. Oh my gosh, I hope I'm saying that right. Triose phosphate isomerase. It's an isomerization reaction, nothing too crazy. We're just turning that ketone into an aldehyde. So we're not doing anything crazy there. It's just we're just changing it up just a little bit. So it's just an isomerization reaction. So now we're going to end up with two molecules of glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. So this is very important because that's how we're going to end up with 2 pyruvate. Um, so this next reaction, reaction 6, we're going to turn glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate into 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Oh my gosh, what a mouthful. So this reaction is catalyzed by glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate dehydrogenase. We're going to add an inorganic phosphate, so a molecule of phosphate. We're going to add that in there because we are going to add a phosphoryl group into carbon 1, just because remember we had glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate from earlier, so we're going to add a phosphate group to our carbon 1. This is not done by a kinase molecule because we're going to generate a reducing pair. So we're going to add NAD plus, and that's going to be reduced to NADH plus a proton. And this is also a reversible reaction, nothing too crazy. And because we have two glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate molecules, we're going to end up with two molecules of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate, just because we're doing this twice. And that's pretty much it for this reaction. It's nothing too crazy. Just remember that you have two molecules of glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate because you converted dihydroxyacetone phosphate into glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. And that's pretty much it for that one. Okay, so for reaction 7, we are going to move from 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate into 3-phosphoglycerate. This is done, surprisingly, by a kinase molecule. At first, when I saw this reaction, I thought maybe we were going to put in a phosphatase molecule, or not molecule, oh my gosh, a phosphatase enzyme. But because we're doing a kinase enzyme, at this step, we are going to generate a molecule of ATP, and this is done through substrate level phosphorylation. So this reaction is a substrate level phosphorylation. It's different from our our typical phosphorylation reactions, just because we are going to be generating that molecule of ATP. So we're going to place a phosphate molecule onto ADP, making ATP. So now our net ATP is going to be 0 because remember, we have two molecules of 1,3-phosphoglycerate. So we're going to do this reaction twice. So we're going to catalyze this reaction with phosphoglycerate kinase just because the molecule that we had was bisphosphoglycerate. But for easier sakes, it's phosphoglycerate kinase. It's pretty straightforward. It's just we're going to make two molecules of 3-phosphoglycerate. We're going to take a phosphate group off of carbon 1, put it onto ADP to create a molecule of ATP. We're going to do that a second time to create two molecules of 3-phosphoglycerate and two molecules of ATP. This is pretty irreversible in terms of the value. We have a negative 18.5 kilojoules per mole, but it is reversible because I have those arrows there. You're able to go back when you do gluconeogenesis, it can go backwards. So that is a good reminder. You can do that. It's more favorable in the forward reaction. I know on my screen it looks a bit more like backwards, quote unquote, just because of the fact that I just drew it that way. Um, but it is reversible. I just drew it that way just because I didn't have any space to keep going downwards. But yeah, that's pretty much it for that reaction. Nothing too crazy. We're just making ATP at this step. This next reaction, reaction 8, we're going to turn 3-phosphoglycerate into 2-phosphoglycerate. Again, we're just changing the structure around a little bit. We're not changing the molecular formula, so you know we got to do another isomerization reaction. So at this point we have, I think it's 3 isomerization reactions. We did it when we changed dihydroxyacetone phosphate into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, as well as when we turn glucose 6-phosphate into fructose 6-phosphate. So again, we're going to turn 3-phosphoglycerate into 2-phosphoglycerate. This is catalyzed by phosphoglycerate mutase. I don't know why. I just think about it as like it's a little mutated form. That's how I think about it when I'm trying to remember the name. This is reversible, nothing too crazy. We're just placing the phosphate group, or not placing, we're moving the phosphate group from carbon 3 to carbon 2, which is also could be carbon 4, 5, and 6 when you think about it from glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate when you originally did it the first time, when you split them from fructose 1,6 bisphosphate, when you cleaved it by aldolase. So yeah, that's the reaction. It's nothing too crazy, and we're gonna have 2 molecules of 2-phosphoglycerate because we had 2 molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. The next reaction is a dehydration reaction in the sense that we're just getting rid of a water molecule, but we're going from 2-phosphoglycerate to phosphoenol pyruvate. Enol because we're going to the enolate form. Um, that's it. It's nothing too crazy, but try to remember that phosphoenol pyruvate has a very high transfer energy potential. Um, but other than that, there's nothing really crazy. I mean, it's pretty straightforward reaction. It's reversible. Um, and yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about this reaction. It's nothing that really stands out to me, but phosphoenol pyruvate is also called PEP, so I'm going to refer to PEP so it's easier instead of saying phosphoenol pyruvate, which I'm probably going to end up saying phosphoenol pyruvate anyways. I'm just pointing again to having you to recall that there's 2 molecules of that. Okay, we have finally made it to our last step of glycolysis. So we're going to go from PEP to pyruvate, 2 molecules of pyruvate, because remember we had 2 molecules of PEP because of the fact that we went to 2 molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. I'm going to keep saying it again just because I want you to know there are 2 molecules of this so you don't forget, okay? That's the whole point. I don't want you to forget about that. So PEP is going to go to pyruvate by pyruvate kinase, and that's I feel like pretty straightforward to remember because we're going to pyruvate, so pyruvate kinase. This is irreversible, okay? This is very irreversible. You cannot go back from pyruvate to PEP. If you're doing gluconeogenesis, you have to go through, you'd have to make oxaloacetate instead. I'll show you that later on when I do gluconeogenesis, but for now, the value of this is negative 31.4 kilojoules per mole in delta G. Standard conditions for the value. So now, because we're this is irreversible because of the fact that we are making ATP. This is a substrate level phosphorylation. So we're gonna add ADP, adenosine diphosphate. For some reason, I cannot say ATP versus ADP, so I'm sorry if I very emphasize it. But pretty much we're gonna go from PEP to pyruvate because we're gonna add ADP. ADP. Oh my goodness. So now we're going to phosphorylate ADP. So now we're going to end up with 2 molecules of ATP, which brings our net ATP to 2. And then we're just going to convert to pyruvate from that. And as well as pyruvate is tautomerizing from the enol form to the keto form. That's pretty much it. That is glycolysis. Yeah, thank you.